Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our first Content Patch E3 Conference Roundup. My name is TotalBiscuit's, with commentary, opinion, and punditry and nonsense in regards to the large press conferences or so-called media briefings being put on display at E3 2014. It's probably quicker than watching them. That seems like a pretty good tagline. Let's go with that. We're going to start with the Sony conference. There's going to be several episodes based on the large media briefings over the next few days, so do expect that to be content. But let's start with Sony. And before I start with that, can I just make the overall obvious comment that it seems like both the big titans this time around, Sony and Microsoft, were playing a fairly muted sort of game in comparison to what they did last year. I mean, last year felt like an all-out battle. It really, really did. And Sony, by most accounts, came out ahead on that one, mostly because they realized which way the wind was blowing, and they went full-on panda mode when it came to things like used games and the lack of always online DRM. So you got to give them a bit of credit for that one. But this time around, that's not actually the case, and now the question is, who's gonna have the best lineup of games going forward? Because the specs are out there, the machines are out there, we can buy them right now, and we're waiting for games to play on them, in particular on the PlayStation 4, which is actually not that surprising at all. I was considering claiming that it was surprising, then realized, oh yeah, I remember the PS3 launch and the 6 months of no games on that thing too. Sony do tend to be a little slower when it comes to getting their exclusives on the market, and as it stands, if you are not buying for multi-format, then the PlayStation 4 isn't actually worth buying at the moment. It has a severe lack of worthwhile exclusives. You've basically got Killzone and Infamous, and outside of that, you've got smaller titles like Resogun, which are not really that engaging for long periods of time at any rate. Everything else, well, it's multi-platform. And frankly, the Xbox One seems to be winning when it comes to things that are worth playing on its platform that aren't on other platforms. Somehow, some way, they managed to pull the rug out, at least early on, from under Nintendo when it came to getting access to some good quality indies. You've got stuff like Super Time Force available on Xbox One, and you also have the sort of faux indie stuff. And I say faux indie because I'm talking about something that is actually released by EA, but kind of feels like an indie title, which of course would be Plants vs. Zombies Garden Warfare, which ended up on a timed exclusive there. That was a pretty interesting strategy from the folks over at Microsoft, and it does seem to have worked out fairly well. Although, that is not a huge amount of titles, I'll be totally honest. We're not seeing a flood of really good quality Xbox One arcade stuff at the moment. Super Time Force kind of stands alone in that regard. Anyway, the mission, in my opinion, for Sony is to demonstrate that over this year, they will have a significant number of first-party releases, good timed exclusives, and reasons to purchase the system for those of us that are still sort of sitting on the sidelines wondering which console to get. This is particularly true when it comes to PC owners who may be considering buying a next-gen machine because they want some of the exclusives. I mean, that, for the last few generations, has been my focus. This time around, I got both, and, well, if this wasn't my job, I'd be very disappointed as an early adopter, let me put it that way. There is, of course, the other thing to bear in mind, that Sony has to prove that the PlayStation Vita is not dead. A lot of people were hoping for more PS Vita releases this time around, and last year really kind of disappointed in that respect. It seems like they were aiming the Vita to be more of a companion to the PlayStation 4 as opposed to its own standalone system, and unfortunately it does look like that's the way it's going, at least for the time being based on the conference. But let's run through game by game by game in chronological order, and we can talk about various things. So they actually opened up with Destiny, which I would imagine was a deliberate choice. Bungie is usually associated with Microsoft. To open up with a title from a traditionally Microsoft-allied studio is a similar sort of move to what Microsoft did in E3 2013, where they opened up with Metal Gear Solid: The Phantom Pain, which comes from a studio traditionally aligned with Sony. You know, they take these kind of shots, and they try to perhaps diminish the history of their competitor and say, well, no, this is actually on this machine. Strangely enough, all of this posturing is really kind of meaningless because these games are on both systems, and if you're wanting to pick the better version, the chances are it will be on the PlayStation 4, since as opposed to the speculation that we had last year, we know for a fact that the PlayStation 4 is putting out better performance at the moment, and it will probably continue to do so. Strangely enough, I found the whole thing about Destiny to be somewhat underwhelming, and this is coming from someone that's actually been to the Bungie studios to have a look at it. It is not a game that intrigues me all that much. It's mostly because it's a console shooter, and they are showing just ludicrous unwillingness to put this thing on PC, a platform that's absolutely perfect for these multiplayer PvE shooters. I mean, it's basically where that genre got its start. Yes, I am talking prior to Borderlands. I'm talking about things like Hellgate, for God's sake, and even things before that had similar sort of ideas and elements. It's a great platform for it, and Bungie seems to be completely ignoring the PC at the moment, which is a little bit silly, but that's Bungie for you in a nutshell. We are talking about the same studio that still hasn't put Halo 3 on PC, and there's no sign either of the big Halo collection coming to PC either. Regardless, it's Destiny. It looks like Destiny. They announced that they will be releasing a white PlayStation 4 alongside with it. I'm not really sure why they do that. It doesn't seem to be particularly exciting. I'm not also sure why people applaud the whole idea. It's like, yeah, it's in a different color. Brilliant. It's going to be under your TV. When are you looking at your PlayStation? You know why I like my consoles black? Because my shelves are black. It matches up quite nicely. Here's a comment from Joystick's live blog for the E3 2014 press conference. Oh god, Glacier White, PlayStation 4. I want it, I do. Why? Why do you want it? It doesn't perform any better, and it's going under your television, in a little nook out of the way. You will never look at it again. Anyway, outside of that, we didn't really hear a huge amount about Destiny, aside from the fact that they did manage to get an exclusive alpha for it, and that's actually out now. You can play that at the moment, which is interesting, certainly. Whatever the case, there doesn't seem to be an announcement as to what frame rate the damn thing's going to run at. We know that on Xbox One it's going to run at 30 frames per second, and they're going to get 1080p out of it, but there's no sign of 60 frames per second at all, only rumors buzzing around as regards to what frame rate the PlayStation 4 version will actually be at. So, yeah, well, even less reason to play it, unless they work on that. It's actually very surprising for a studio so experienced to think that 30 FPS for a first-person shooter is okay, but it's not like the last few Halos didn't run at that. Unfortunately, we're at a point in the console development where showpieces and really fancy high-fidelity graphics are more important than actual playability. I'm hoping that will calm down over the next few years, but do expect a lot more 30 FPS releases on those consoles until they stop waving their dicks at each other and saying, "Mine looks shinier!" We then moved on to an actual exclusive from Ready at Dawn Games, that being the Order 1886, which of course we did see teased last year. We saw a little bit more, not much gameplay, just a smidge, but of course we do now know that it will run at 30 FPS, and more to the point, it's going to be running at this weird, quote, cinematic resolution. It's at a really strange aspect ratio. This thing is running at the kind of aspect ratio you expect from a cinema. It's 2.4 to 1, yeah? The resolution it's actually running at is 1920 by 800. So, actually, you're getting a lower resolution game than you otherwise would, which is kind of amusing. Some journalists have tried to make out that this is somehow a good thing. I'm not really sure how they could possibly justify that. The arguments that I've read have been extremely flimsy to say the least, claiming that it has a more focused look and kind of draws your eyes in, which doesn't make a damn lick of sense in any way. Let's cut through the nonsense once again and get to what this is really about. The fact is, they want to make it as shiny as possible, they still want to give the 1080p effect, but they want to render less on the screen. How do you do that? Well, you lower the resolution, which is what that is. It's 1920 by 800, that is a lower resolution. In fact, 1920 by 800 is about 75% of the actual pixels that you would find in 1920 by 1080. A significant reduction. And of course that allows them to put a lot of really nice graphical effects in it, and that's what they're aiming to do. They're aiming to be a graphical showcase. But make no mistake, and please do not be fooled by Ready at Dawn's attempts to claim this is somehow more filmic or cinematic. It's bollocks. They want the graphics to look better, like they want it to be a showpiece. They want it to be the flagship title for the PlayStation 4, and they are cutting every corner possible to make that happen. Do not believe it is for your benefit. It is not. And it's a shame, really, because it looks like the kind of thing I would dig. The setting itself is something I would very much enjoy. And I do dig third-person shooters, but as it stands at the moment, it does look like it's going to be one of those games that's designed to show off the hardware and little else. Alright, so we can move on to the next title that they showed, which was Entwined. That's actually out right now, a bit of a surprise indie title being popped out there, which is good. This is the kind of thing that I do want to see from Sony. They have shown a good amount of support for indie devs over the past few years, and of course their platform has been a great place to play games like Journey and Flower. Entwined is already out, it's got a reasonable reception, and it's kind of Panzer Dragoon-esque from what I can tell. So it was quite nice that they decided to throw that out there pretty much immediately. And then they followed up with the announcement of some standalone DLC for Infamous, which made the whole announcement of Entwined a little bit weird. It's like, we're gonna jam Entwined in between The Order and some Infamous DLC. The conference, like, up to that point kind of felt scattershot as to what they wanted to try and drive home, and it took a while to really get back on the rails, honestly. But it was one of those fairly lengthy, droning-on Sony conferences where they're trying to pack in as much as possible, so I suppose that keeping up the pace was maybe not their highest priority. The DLC looks fine. I like the standalone DLC idea. This was actually done with Infamous 2 Circus of Blood as well, by the way, which I think is a really good way of doing things. It's a good way to introduce people to the franchise. It's a nice, cheap way to kind of buy parts of the game as you want, which is something I've very much been in favor of, and it's something we've seen from Sony over the past few years with things like Uncharted, as well as the rather fantastic Starhawk. That's available kind of in parts. You can buy the single player or the multiplayer or both. So I see this kind of DLC release as being a bit of an extension of that, so I definitely dig it. And of course we've got Little Big Planet 3. I love the fact that Little Big Planet exists. I have no interest whatsoever in playing it. It has a great deal of creativity, and the PlayStation 4 version does look quite fantastic, don't get me wrong, but I have never really had the opportunity to truly dive into it, and since I don't like platforming gameplay, I'd probably want to make my own titles in it, and I just don't have the patience. So I really kind of skipped over that. But it is nice. I love every time, like, Little Big Planet or anything similar to that comes on the stage. It's just kind of a giant sack of happiness, and I dig that, because these conferences can get extremely either blasé about things or really serious, and games like Little Big Planet 3 do lighten things up just a little bit, so I certainly dig that one. Alright, that moves on to Blood-Borne, which is definitely not happy or anything along those lines. This is possibly the most exciting thing that we saw from the Sony conference up to this point. It's going to be a PlayStation 4 exclusive, which was definitely not brilliant. It's not brilliant, but of course it is by the original director of Demon's Souls, Hidetaka Miyazaki. He's going to be directing this one, and bear in mind he did not direct Dark Souls 2, so this is a bit of a return possibly to the Demon's Souls and old Dark Souls style, as opposed to the changes they made in Dark Souls 2. We didn't really learn too much about it, other than the fact that it's a very different setting, so it seems like it will have very Dark/Demon's Souls mechanics and design philosophies behind it, but they have changed the theme to be, I don't know if I would really necessarily call it steampunk. It's definitely very gothic, but it certainly seems to have a technological element to it as well, so I am very interested in having a look at that. Unfortunately, since then, we did find out it would be running at 1080p 30. Will I still play it? Maybe. I mean, I did play Demon's Souls at 30 frames per second on PlayStation 3, and I played Dark Souls there as well, admittedly. Of course, Dark Souls 2 plays a crap ton better, and even Dark Souls 1, if you mod it, can be played at 60 FPS, although not without some bugs here and there. I will probably force myself to play it, I'll be totally honest with you. If it's anything like Demon's Souls, which is one of my favorite PS3 games, I'll stomach the fact that it's running at 30, and at least it feels alright. I think that it's obviously always going to feel better at 60, but there's something about the mechanics of the Souls games, in particular the weight of the combat, that almost, I wouldn't say it overrides the problems of 30 frames per second, but it certainly helps the combat still feel pretty good and responsive, regardless of the fact that it's running at a subpar frame rate. So, you know, it's every now and then we have to come down from our high horses for something special. That might be it, although, obviously, you know my preference. Alright, let's move on, shall we? So we got more Far Cry here. Have you noticed up to this point there haven't actually been all that many exclusives that look particularly exciting in the Sony conference? This is also a theme with the Microsoft conference as well. Both of the big platform providers this year have been focusing on the idea of our version of this multi-platform game will be the best. And then kind of whispering console version. You know, we've heard the term console exclusive bandied around here because they don't want to mention the PC. Because they know the PlayStation version will not be able to live up to that, and neither will the Xbox One version. But they showed the Far Cry 4 demo, which actually looked pretty good. Obviously, it made me pretty excited for the PC version. The PC version of Far Cry 3 was excellent for the most part. It definitely was a bit of a performance hog, but it ran pretty well on most systems. So, Far Cry 4 is looking pretty good. The change of scenery looks nice. The wingsuit, I'm very much hoping will give a really nice amount of freedom, although I have to wonder if it can only be used at scripted points. Obviously, with the hang gliders in Far Cry 3, you had to find them, which, as you probably remember from my video, I'm pretty bad at. But the wingsuit looks like the kind of thing you could use constantly, and that seems like a really good way of getting around. Some interesting co-op functionality in there, considering the co-op in Far Cry 3 was basically tacked on. It's nice to see that Far Cry 4 will have a little bit more in there. It also looks like it's a bit drop-in. We're not 100% sure how that works as of yet. They're talking about seamless co-op play, but what was really interesting in the PlayStation 4 conference is that they announced that you wouldn't actually have to own the game in order to jump in as that character and help with the co-op play, which... that's extremely unusual, and that's a really nice move. As far as we know up to this point, that's a PlayStation 4 exclusive, so that's a pretty good get. I've got to give them credit for that one. We'll see if it expands to other platforms going on, but what an intriguing idea. It's not the first time it's been done. Nintendo was pretty good with that when it came to the DS, the ability to share a reduced version of the game via the wireless system. In fact, it's been done, I think, even before that. But I'm glad to see it in the next gen. That's very, very nice indeed. Aside from that, it looks like more Far Cry, which I'm ultimately fine with, although how formulaic are Ubisoft games getting at this point? I have got to say. There was a really nice article called Ubisoft the Game, the Review, which made it strikingly obvious that Ubisoft, perhaps above any other developer right now, is really into using the same mechanics in every possible series of games, and right now it seems with their next-gen stuff, including Assassin's Creed Unity and Far Cry 4, this whole drop-in, drop-out co-op thing has been added to the mix, but there's still strongholds, there's still watchtowers to capture, and control points, and all that kind of thing. But, you know, it definitely looks good. You know, all the Far Cry games are one way or the other. I do appreciate the different setting as well. We don't really get to see the sort of Himalayan region be used in too many video games, so that is pretty good. Then we got this ridiculous sequence of these fake letters being read out, which was hilarious. Cheesy, but kind of hilarious. Now, I think they were self-aware very much of that. The first trailer was a CG trailer for Dead Island 2. Can I just say, by the way, I prefer the direction they're going with this at the moment, because Dead Island in and of itself is a ludicrous proposition. The original CG trailer made it out like the whole thing was going to be really serious and grim and sad. One of the best looking trailers ever made, completely and totally irrelevant to the actual game itself. Just nonsense. Whereas this time around, they went for the humor aspect. Good, because Dead Island is dumb. Extremely dumb. And I think that the trailers need to reflect that. So it seems like they're fully embracing that up to this point, which is certainly a good thing indeed. We then got Battlefield Hardline. God. I've already played this, and I'll be doing a full impression of the beta later on. But it's been having server problems, so I haven't had too much of a chance to really dig into it in a big way. But I did an hour or two of gameplay in this thing, and this is so uninspired at this point. They were putting it out there and saying, hey, you can get into the beta really quickly, and so on and so forth, as part of their short trailer that they were promoting at the PS4 conference. But I am in the beta for the PC, and I see no reason at all to play it over Battlefield 4 at this point. I mean, not only does it run worse in terms of its tick rate on the servers, there was a recent update to Battlefield 4 which increased the tick rate and got rid of a lot of the mutual kills. Well, they're back in the beta of Battlefield Hardline at any rate. I hope that will get fixed prior to launch, but the tick rate in that had a bunch of kills. I mean, I think in the hour that I played, we had about 5 or 6 mutual kills where we both killed each other at the same time with guns, which indicates that the tick or update rate of a server is too low. This was a problem with the Battlefield 4 game as well, but that has been, for the most part, resolved. The problem with Hardline is it makes no damn sense. It really is like just playing two armies. They're not criminals and cops. They're just armies. They're so militarized. I mean, for God's sake, both the criminals and the police have helicopters with miniguns attached to them. And the game modes, which might be kind of a little bit Payday or GTA inspired, are still basically spins on the good old capture the flag or domination mode. So I do not dig Hardline at all at the moment, and I'll be giving you full reasons why once I do my video on the PC beta. Not impressive. They then went on to talk about their Disney partnership, which is allowing for the Hulk to come to Disney Infinity on PlayStation, which again is this whole exclusive cut content, which no one should ever actually celebrate. I suppose if you only intend to own one console, and you hear that something you like is coming to that console only, you can kind of celebrate, but you should be celebrating the same if it came to all machines. Like, there's no benefit, outside of bragging rights and you being a knobsack to everybody, that you would celebrate something going to your machine over another. That is not something that I would ever expect to hear cheering about. But we always get that at those conferences. I have no idea who they stock them with, but if they're press, then shame on every sodding press member that cheers at those bloody things. Jesus. Who exactly are you supporting here? I have to wonder. We also heard that Paradox is going to be bringing games to the PlayStation 4, which came with a Magicka 2 announcement. Excellent. Certainly hoping that that is not a big-time exclusive. I want to see that on PC as soon as humanly possible. And they also announced they're remastering Grim Fandango for PS4 and Vita. Not doing it for PC. Oh my god. You cannot legally buy Grim Fandango! It is impossible! They even pointed that out during the conference in their fake letter, which ended up being from Tim Schafer. You cannot legally buy this game. The only way to play it on PC is to steal it! Oh my god. But I'm glad that they're remastering it, because it's an incredible game, and I'm sure it'll work fine on console, but good lord. Oh, you are literally throwing away money. At least partner with GOG for a version on there. At least do that. Ugh. Alright, okay. We then got Devolver Digital on the stage, which is awesome. Do love those guys. Great publisher, very cooperative. They don't even yell at me when I shout at their video games, so that's a plus. They'll be bringing things like Broforce, Hotline Miami 2, and the now announced Titan Souls Not a Hero, and the forthcoming Crow Team title to the PlayStation 4, which, you know, it's good. It's good to see third-party support, but I don't think that's really surprising. You know, Devolver Digital isn't really a big get for either of them. I'm just glad to see Devolver Digital being able to sell more games on more platforms, so that's good. Newest Suda51 game is an exclusive to the PlayStation 4. It could be good, it might not be. It's called Let It Die. There is guitar music and flamethrowers, and it's Suda51, so we have no idea what the hell's going on. Yeah, I don't think there's much that we can really talk about there. Giant Squid, the studio formed by Journey's art director Matt Naver, will be working on a title called Abzu, I believe. It's going to be published by 505. That's going to be on PlayStation 4 as well. It is about exploring underwater, and there are sharks and whales and things there, and the art style is kind of like Journey, and anything that's even close to being like Journey is something that I keep a very close eye on, so yeah, there's that coming out as well. Most likely going to be PlayStation 4 exclusive only from what we've been told. It did say console debut on PlayStation, though, so that it may, as a result, be coming to PC. That's usually what console exclusive means, so we might see it on PC, which would be good. I'm hoping that that would be the case. And then we got the big drop No Man's Sky. Obviously, we've seen a little bit about this before, but this time around we saw a lot more footage. This is from Hello Games that brought you titles like, in fact, these were the only titles they brought you, Joe Danger and Joe Danger the Movie, which I have praised to high heaven as being goddamn fantastic. And now they're making this procedurally generated game where you can fly around your own sodding universe, land on planets, discover new things, fight in space, fly from a planet into space, go to other planets, and apparently no two games will ever be the same. And this is obviously a game that looks extremely exciting, and simultaneously concerns the hell out of me, because it's a small indie studio doing this. Admittedly, they've got more support doing it, but we're talking about procedural generation, and the problem with procedural generation is it tends to result in subpar experiences, because you cannot guarantee that any of the worlds you visit will actually be interesting in any way, or that there'll be enough content in the game to justify going to all these different worlds and really having things work out. And they still haven't really explained exactly what the gameplay is going to involve outside of exploration and dogfighting. We know that there is some space-based dogfighting in it. We know that there is some exploration in it. We know that there are dinosaurs in it. But unfortunately, we don't really know a huge amount else. What is the reason for the exploration? I think that's the main thing. You can talk about flying around and finding materials and finding mountains, and it's like, hey, that mountain's off in the distance. You can go explore it. But unless there is a reason to do that, then I cannot imagine exactly why it would be interesting. But it does sound like resource gathering is a big part of it. But I suppose the question is towards what goal? Exploring is fine, but there's got to be either an end goal or something you can gain along the way. It sounds like the best way that this would work out, and the early previews from 2013 tended to indicate that this was the case, that you would be focused on kind of upgrading your ship and transporting cargo around the universe. And the way that you would do that is through exploration or resource gathering on planets. And there would be pirates you'd have to deal with, huge fleet battles and different factions. That sounds like it would work. Definitely. And it sounds actually very similar to Elite, only you can go into the planetary atmosphere and explore all these procedurally generated worlds. That could work. It very well could. It obviously looks incredible, but as a result, I am extremely cautious because it looks highly ambitious, and procedural generation up to this point has not necessarily proven that it is a particularly good idea in most titles that it's been used in. More often than not, it results in fairly bland places to explore, and I'm certainly hoping that that is not true this time around. Definitely looks good, though. We know it's coming to PC, but it is coming to PlayStation 4 first. We don't know if that's console first. It may come to PC at the same time as PS4, but we may have to wait on PC for that for a little while, unfortunately. They've also announced that YouTube will be making its way to PlayStation 4 fully, so you'll be able to upload directly and do a lot more stuff with YouTube than you were able to previously. They're also going to be upgrading their Twitch and Ustream capabilities, and they alluded once again to the whole help and hinder idea with other people's multiplayer games, something that we actually saw last year with the PlayStation 4 announcement, but there's really been no justification for that as of yet. We don't know exactly what's going to happen, when it's going to happen, and how it's going to be implemented. They then did a big feature on free-to-play games, which is honestly what the PlayStation 4 really has going for it at the moment. It has a lot of really good free-to-play titles. If you don't own a powerful enough PC to run things like PlanetSide 2, like Warframe, like War Thunder, like Blacklight Retribution, it's a fairly good platform to own. They're going to also be adding a new version of Fat Princess, which will be available on Vita as well, Kingdom Under Fire 2, Destiny of Spirits, My Singing Monsters, a game called Reaper's going to be on there as well, Guns Up, Loadout, which I believe is either now out or very close to being out, and actually has a quote from me in the trailer on the Sony channel. That's just weird. That's just really strange. I found myself on the Nintendo channel as well. That was kind of amusing. And then they went on to PlayStation Now. We hadn't heard a huge amount about this, and now we know that the open beta will be delivered to the United States on July the 31st. This will be their cloud streaming service. They have announced that a number of PlayStation 3 and PlayStation 4 games will be available for streaming that way. We're going to be seeing things like Metal Gear Solid Ground Zeroes, Ultra Street Fighter 4, Ratchet & Clank, Dead Space 3, God of War Ascension, that kind of thing. Ultra Street Fighter 4 is going to be the real test for me, because I remember playing that on live and it just being an awful experience, not being remotely responsive enough to actually be playable. So I certainly hope that the Gaikai technology they're using for this streaming is going to be good. But obviously, the most exciting thing about it is the ability to stream some PS3 titles. How they're going to do that and how much they're going to cost, though, is the big factor. I'm okay revisiting some of the PS3 titles using PlayStation Now. If for some reason I can't can't just own them on PS3. I didn't throw my PS3 away. There was no point. I still have it. So it may very well be a better idea just to do it that way. But if they actually have a rental service in place, then I would definitely consider using PlayStation Now as a convenience thing, especially considering you don't have to download a huge amount of data. You can just play immediately. That's a benefit. We don't know about how it's going to work demos-wise either. Will they have a timed demo that uses the streaming service? I would love to see that. That was a great feature of On Live. Hopefully they look towards that as well. PlayStation Vita. Yeah, well, not really a brilliant set of announcements for that, unfortunately. I'd love to say that there was, but no. They're talking a lot about crossplay, and they emphasize that the Vita would be a great way to play stuff from PlayStation Now. It does seem to me that this has solidified the Vita's position as a machine for people that either like Japanese games, where the Vita's getting quite a few of those, or who want to use it as a companion piece of hardware. But they're giving you another option to do that now in the form of the Vita TV, which is actually coming to the States. It's just called PlayStation TV over here. It's going to be $99 on its own, or $140 with a bundle, which includes a DualShock 3, as well as a copy of Lego Movie the Game and an 8GB card. So that's a pretty good deal. Most of the games from Vita will apparently run on this thing. So if you want a reason to play Persona 4 Golden, I certainly don't blame you for that, or titles like Soul Sacrifice, then it looks like this will be the way to do that. And it will be very affordable as well. It's not bad. Yeah, that's actually, strangely enough, a very interesting way of selling a console. They basically just made the cheapest, best console right now, and it's a Vita without a screen. $99, and you get to play some pretty good games. Obviously, they don't look as good as a PS3, but it's still a cheap option, and there are some decent titles on it. So, what I'm hoping for is widespread adoption of this device, and as a result, we see more third-party interest in developing for the Vita. That's really what I want to see there. Also, it looks like Sony's taking a really big shot at the set-top box market at the moment. Obviously, Apple are in on that. Amazon's in on that. There's a lot of companies going for it. And the Vita TV is priced aggressively towards that, and also has some pretty nice capabilities that, frankly, are not available on those systems. So, the Vita TV looks like a very strong contender. And it can also do this whole beaming footage from your PlayStation 4 to another television in the house, which I'm actually going to buy one specifically to do that, so that I can play downstairs if I want to. So, yeah, I dig that. I very much dig that. Now, this was followed up by footage of Mortal Kombat X, or 10, whichever you prefer. This is the first time that we've seen the gameplay. It was HUDless, which always looks a little bit weird, but it does definitely look like a souped-up version of Mortal Kombat 9. They seem to have incorporated a lot of environmental effects and attacks that are available in the game Injustice, so I definitely dig that. Demonstrated a few new characters as well. I particularly like the design of the sort of ogre-like character that has a psychopathic knife-wielding girl riding on the top. Really interesting character design there. Whenever he gets knocked down, she falls off, kind of hides in the background, then comes and jumps back on his back to continue the fight. I dig that. Looks like more X-ray moves. Probably won't be skippable. I mean, I just hope the X-ray moves are shorter, frankly. Yeah, that was the big problem I had with it. X-ray's amazing the first few times you see it, and then it becomes a sodding chore. So hopefully they add a bigger variety of X-ray moves and shorten them. Outside of that, it looks like Mortal Kombat, which means that I want to play it because Mortal Kombat. Then, we had about 15 minutes of stuff about television, mostly. Television. Concept art for a series called Powers, which will be available if you are a PlayStation Plus subscriber for free. And it looks like Sony's first foray into creating original content. And we're seeing a lot of studios do that right now. Obviously, Netflix is doing it, Amazon's doing it, and now Sony's doing it. The series looks potentially interesting, but this bloody thing dragged on. I can tell that for a fact. It will be heading our way in December. Be available for Sony platforms only, I am afraid. So if you don't own a Sony platform, you are fresh out of luck on that one, I'm afraid. They also then showed a clip of the Ratchet Clank movie, which I could not care less about in any way, shape, or form. But then they followed up by saying they're remaking the original Ratchet & Clank and adding new sequences to it, so I can definitely dig that. And then they had a spoilerific trailer of Last of Us Remastered. Now, can I make my opinion on remastered games from the previous generation completely clear? I am absolutely in favor of them as long as they make them run at 60 frames per second. If you don't, you're missing the point. The problem with a lot of the really good games that were released for console towards the end of the lifespan is that they ran like absolute arse. Sub 720p resolution, sub 30 FPS frame rates. big problem I had with The Last of Us. I wanted to like it, I really did. And I'm very excited to be able to play The Last of Us in 1080p 60 FPS. Resolution I'm not so concerned about, but the frame rate, that's key, because that really affects the controls, and I feel that the addition of the touchpad might very well also give a few extra options to the controller, which actually relied on a lot of button combinations, so hopefully they'll be able to offload some of those unnecessary combos over to the middle touchpad. So yeah, I'm very excited to play Last of Us, and that's actually coming out in July, so that's really exciting. I'll be looking for that one, definitely. Then we saw a bunch of stuff about Phantom Pain, which means we saw nothing about Phantom Pain. You know how that one works. Oh dear. And then perhaps the biggest announcement to follow that one up, which was also followed up, of course, not in the trailer for the Sony conference. GTA 5 is coming to next-gen platforms. PlayStation 4, which we also know it's coming to Xbox One and PC, which was the biggest thing, I think, for a lot of us on PC. We were sick of waiting for the damn thing. Apparently, it is coming out. In fact, it is now available for pre-order. Don't pre-order it! Please. Please don't. Do you remember how GTA 4 ran? Do you remember that? Don't do it again. Wait. Please wait. You cannot trust Rockstar when it comes to this sort of thing. They have a very sketchy history when it comes to giving a damn about PC. Now, they're claiming that it will include upgraded AI, new wildlife, better draw distance, denser traffic, advanced weather effects, and so on and so forth. Cool. And it probably won't include games for Windows Live, although it might still have the Rockstar Social Club involved in it. But please, please wait. I mean, come on. It's GTA 5. It's been out for over a year. If you wanted to play it, you would have played it by now. You can wait just a wee little bit. Hold your bloody horses until the press have had a chance to have a look at it and check whether or not the port's any good. Please. I'm just trying to save you money here. You know, it's up to you if you want to throw money at something and actually trust Rockstar, but I don't see a huge number of reasons to do that. Now, the Max Payne 3 port was okay, but still, the last GTA ran like arse. And remember when they ported over LA Noire? Yeah, 30 FPS lock. So just careful, careful. Be patient. Patience is very rewarding. Trust me. It allows you to save a hell of a lot of money. Ends up being good? Hell, we'll tell you on day one, then you can just buy it. What did you miss out on? Not too much. Then finally, they wrapped up with a big bit of gameplay from Arkham Knight, which does look pretty good. I was actually very impressed by the density of the city, frankly. I expected it just to be another open-world Arkham game, but the city looks really, really good. I can't wait to see what it looks like on PC. It looks more alive. It definitely looks denser. The inclusion of the Batmobile is interesting, although it seems like the Batmobile will only be available in certain areas in the game. And of course, the Batmobile has guns on it, which they conveniently get around by saying, oh, well, all the enemies you're destroying with this are robot tanks, so you can only use it in those specific areas. You can't actually gun down civilians with it, for obvious lore reasons, and we already knew who the prime villain there was as well. But it looks good. It certainly looks good. Don't get me wrong. It looks like a big step forward from Arkham Origins, which was very much a filler game, as I'm sure many people know. But that pretty much wraps up the PlayStation conference, and my opinions on that. Not a huge number of really exciting exclusives, and a lot of the exclusives that are coming are either console exclusives, which means that they will end up on PC anyway, or are remakes, like the Vita and PS4 version of Grim Fandango. Outside of Blood-Borne, there's really not a lot that I'm actually looking forward to on PlayStation 4 at the moment, and that is bad news. Because this sounds like a repeat of the first couple of years of the PS3, where we just didn't have those big-hitting exclusive titles. I was interested in the order until they did this nonsense with the frame rate. Now I just won't be buying it. It's as simple as that. They treat me like an idiot. I will treat them like a company that I don't want to be involved with. So outside of Blood-Borne and maybe the new Suda51 game, I am not massively thrilled by what they actually showed us at the PlayStation 4 conference. And a lot of the good stuff like No Man's Sky and Magicka 2, well, that's going to be coming to PC anyway, so who really cares on that one? I think it was an exciting conference for those who already own a PS4 and that's their next-gen console of choice, because we did see some very nice footage coming from these multi-platform releases. But it was probably running on PC. It probably was, guys. I'm just gonna be completely honest. Do not trust E3. Never, ever, ever trust E3, please. We have learned from many, many events before that the stuff that you get to see at E3 is not necessarily representative of the final product. My name's been TotalBiscuit, and that of course, was my recap of the Sony E3 2014 conferences. More of these to come over the next few days, and maybe, just maybe, a couple of redubs. Thank you very much for watching, folks. I'll see you next time.